Our story begins when a tree starts glowing bright blue, and a voice comes out of it coughing and saying that he was choking to death like that. He is completely confused as he wakes up without knowing where he is, although he clearly realizes that this place is not his home. He wonders why he woke up in the middle of the woods. What's more, he cries out in shock when his hair becomes as thick as tree vines, just thinking that it must all be a strange dream or something. He thinks that maybe he was too busy and something probably happened while he didn't realize it, but instead of worrying too much, he decides that he could just keep sleeping because after all he could probably wake up from that dream. Even though he wanted to, it was still absurd to realize that he had actually turned into a tree and that this was just some ridiculous joke because it was far from real. He could only remember drinking water, and now he could imagine that he had probably choked to death on it. It also made him realize that he had been reincarnated, but it was still super weird to have been reincarnated as a tree. To find out exactly how and why it became a tree, you need to be subscribed to this channel to keep up with all the Manuka summary video releases. That said, let's move on. The protagonist thinks that usually, when people are reincarnated in another world, they are reborn as some good-looking guy with a predefined harem, but at this moment he didn't even have his 4 limbs. Without hands, he couldn't even lift weights. He wondered what he had done wrong, and it seemed that there was no way to change things now that he had become a tree, but then he realized that there was something wrong. After all, trees aren't supposed to have eyes, but he could still see his surroundings. He realized that the height of that canyon must have been over 100 meters, and now he could feel himself practically trapped between 2 mountains. He wondered if trees could even have sight, and never thought he could smell, or rather feel, the things around him like that. He had about 50 branches and could move another one, but it seemed that because he had stood still for too long, his legs had gone very numb, and now he couldn't control the other parts of his body as well as he could. Even so, he has become able to use his 5 senses better. He has heard a few howls from monsters so far and thinks that if they wanted to hurt him, he couldn't do anything to stop it. If even a ridiculous woodpecker is watching him and tries to do any damage to his body, he could certainly die easily. But he is surprised when he looks up at the sky and notices a plane passing by, which means that he should still be in the same century as he was born in his previous life. At the same time, 2 bees start circling the tree and irritate him because they are noisy and annoying, so he quickly launches an attack with his whip, killing them with a double kill. But not only does this surprise him, but when a sort of system window congratulates him on having killed 2 bees, he gets 0.2 evolution points. He was Yuziyu, having the body of a mutated willow tree with a lifespan of no more than 20 years and who had just gained his first evolution points. He had the abilities of mutant branches, as well as passive abilities to gain sunlight every day to accumulate evolution points, and could also kill other creatures to gain evolution points based on the power of the creature he was targeting. Yuziyu is surprised that the name his tree was given was also the same as when he was still human, and the window asks if he would like to use his evolution points now. He considers how he got 0.1 points from killing a bee, and getting sunlight every day would only earn him the same score per day. It seemed that he could only improve his current branches, but in any case, getting stronger wasn't bad, and he wanted to see how he could handle things that way. Yuziyu was worried because there were threats on all sides within the forest, and he needed to use everything in his power to get stronger. He was surprised to see that his branches were really like his arms, which made him feel very relieved because now he didn't have to worry about anything else. There was a hive of bees nearby that made a lot of noise, and he wanted to get rid of them quickly, so he decided to make them his new evolution points. Yuziyu attacks the bees with a laugh, quite happy to cause such a slaughter of the insect, and so half a month passes. Since then, all of Yuziyu's branches had been strengthened, and he was now becoming much stronger, still having 0.3 evolution points left over since then. Yuziyu managed to unite all his branches at the same time so that he could attack a large stone as a very powerful super attack. Or that's what should have happened, but his branches still weren't able to touch the stone directly, but it was still enough to cause a bit of destruction. Using air movement from this to cause damage really didn't seem too bad a tactic, and he could let his enemies underestimate him from a distance and then kill them with one swift movement. It had been half a month since he had awakened, but now he was much bigger and was able to evolve a lot. A normal tree wouldn't have grown as quickly as he did, and what's more, he was now able to feel his roots absorbing energy. Yuziyu had been afraid that he wouldn't be able to do anything, but he knew that he could get even stronger from now on, especially because he was able to absorb more quickly than other creatures, and he had something that other people don't have, and that was its lifespan, because it couldn't get sick or tired, and being 20 years old at the moment, with the evolution points, it could keep growing, and one day it could become something as impressive as the world tree. Yuziyu no longer needed to worry about working, studying, eating, or thinking about anything now that he had been reincarnated as a tree, and he certainly didn't need to worry about anything. He could start on his unique path to becoming God, which was incredible. Suddenly, he heard some bird calls and thought about how a few days ago, when he broke off a branch that was blocking the sunlight, a new bird's nest had appeared in his own tree. It seemed to be a medium-sized peregrine falcon and a ferocious beast. The size of an adult peregrine falcon was around 41 to 50 centimeters, with a wingspan of around 1 meter. It was a bird that could fly from 271 to 360 kilometers per hour, which was impressive considering that a leopard could only have a speed of 120 kilometers per hour. It was so fast that if used to hunt its prey, it would leave its prey choking from being so nervous about running away from something like that. Yuziyu could feel that this world was now filled with mutant air and was totally different from the world of his previous life. There was still the use of his air battle ability, and he thought that if he just tamed them and made the animals help him, he could secure even more power in this world. Since the problems had reached that point, he couldn't change anything, and that was the difficulty of arriving in his second life. But this time, no matter how dangerous that world might be, he would do his best to survive. In this world, there were storm wolves, huge ants, spider queens, and all kinds of other huge creatures and monsters. Meanwhile, Yuziyu managed to catch a rabbit without killing any other creature, and earned points for this effort too, and decides to use this meat to feed the baby hawk bird, and he himself is amazed at the disgusting way the chicks start to eat the rabbit meat. Still, he manages to get points from the sunlight and is relieved that he has finally achieved a full point. And so, finally all 50 of his branches were strengthened, and now the next thing Yuziyu needed to do was strengthen the roots as well as the trunk. The protagonist is surprised because he didn't think he would need 1 point to strengthen a root, which was almost 10 times what he used to strengthen his branches, meaning that the roots were much more important. Yuziyu got excited and started to strengthen his root using his available point, but to his surprise he felt great pain and was confused by what was happening. He was frightened because the evolution hurt so much that it felt like a drill that wouldn't stop, but to his surprise, his root grew to the point where it was as huge as a black python that could move freely and without any great hindrance from him, making him overjoyed because that was the true power of the evolution points. It seemed that the branches and roots could move freely, but he was curious about its trunk too, and tried to start moving it as well. But instead of moving, he felt a gigantic pain that was even worse than the previous one, and he decided to put that aside in favor of running because in reality Yuziyu couldn't even move a little. It seemed that he would need to strengthen his 8 roots in order to protect the trunk, which was like his heart, and so he should protect it at all costs. Yuziyu realized that he had a great force of destruction, and so he should start by hiding it first before anything else. But anyway, all the evolution points had been used successfully, and now he needed to be able to use more of it. Suddenly, he notices a movement in the undergrowth and prepares himself for battle mode, wondering who was approaching. What he found under the bushes was a fox lying on the ground with a large wound on its body, which shocked the protagonist, but luckily it still seemed to be alive, although the wound was black and appeared to be from some kind of poisoning. He thinks it should be possible to turn evolution points into food, but he couldn't allow the hawks to stop and eat her. The system window warns that the liquid from the branch could be used to detoxify and stop the bleeding from the energy and could cause pleasant effects. Yuziyu is surprised by this, and the system keeps notifying him that after use, the branch will lose its strengthening point effect and return to its normal level. He decided that he could just take the poison from the fox and kill it to get his points, then use it as food, thus getting points and strengthening the root as he wished. The protagonist heals the fox as expected, and the system recognizes the wound being healed, stops bleeding, recovers, and thus restores its energy. Yuziyu feels incredible to the point of looking like a doctor, but this has reduced his branches from 50 to 49. Now that the poison has been cleansed, it was the ideal moment to turn his evolution point, but before the protagonist could use the fox to his advantage, it approached him and was all lovey-dovey with him, looking very grateful. Yuziyu gets annoyed and tells her not to keep rubbing up against him like that, and also not to think that she could get rid of it just because she caressed him. After all, she was just a mere evolution point, but she was too cute to kill, so Yuziyu couldn't bear the thought, and decided that he could think about it later, and would first worry about petting the fox. She had eyes like crystals and saw fur, but suddenly she began to glow to the point where he was shocked and confused. The system explains that now that the fox had received the liquid from the branch, it had begun to evolve, and now it had achieved its new mutation and was at age 3 of 30, having the beginner level, being stage 4, and had a special ability called Charming Eyes. Yuziyu is impressed because the fox has grown much more than before and its fur now looks like fire. The protagonist then opens the status window and realizes that he now also has a beginner level in his file and the stage marked as 9, and just as expected he didn't know anything about it until a little while before. It seemed that he was 5 levels stronger than the fox, and it seemed that the essence was not only healing but also accelerated the evolution of other creatures. And at that stage, after growing up, he could see his own power emerging. But even more importantly, he should be able to see the difference between himself and his enemies, perhaps after he was able to reach the first rank, or maybe the second rank, super rank, or even the final rank, the kind that could reach the immortal level. Yuziyu could feel as if his life, or rather his life as a tree, had just started on the road to becoming a god in that world. He wonders if he could be counted as a human tree or something, and this makes him wonder why the fox has been on the run all this time in the forest. He thinks it must have been being hunted by other humans because its fur must have been worth a lot of money and the hole in its body looked like an arrow wound. These days, Yuziyu hadn't been prepared to interact with humans, which was a problem, especially since the last thing he was interested in was meeting bad humans. He could end up being treated like a demon tree and killed, so he decided that he could only act once he had become strong enough, so for now he should just act like an ordinary tree as discreetly as possible. Suddenly, the fox takes off running and Yuziyu is worried about who is approaching, soon realizing that it is two humans. He wonders why humans have appeared just now, and suddenly the two girls say they've come to see their father, which leaves the protagonist totally confused. The women leave an offering under the tree and pray, and Yuziyu is surprised because he never imagined that their father was buried under their feet, probably being part of their roots now, but he still couldn't stop thinking that there was something very strange about the whole situation. Finally, one of them stopped praying and said she wanted to eat the apple straight away, and the other asked why her sister was in such a hurry, and she complained that her father would let her eat as much as she wanted without saying anything in return. Yuziyu was hoping that they would leave at once because she wanted to eat those offerings, and one sister pulled the other away saying that they needed to go back and take a bath, so the two left to go to a nearby lake so that they could bathe. The two girls played around in the bath, and one of them even mentioned the other's name, which was Xiaoling. Meanwhile, Yuziyu was very frustrated because there was a tree blocking his view of the girls' bath, and he realized that he could try to change his position so that he could see better. He uses all his strength to get up and see further, becoming frustrated at his own weakness. Eventually, Ling and her sister leave and the protagonist sighs with relief, hoping that they will never come near there again. Suddenly, one of them stops and says that they will come back to see their father again, and so a week has passed since that day. The calm place that was the canyon was full of hidden dangers. In it there was the stage 3 beginner peregrine falcon. There was also the mutated golden eagle with a life force talent where its scream could burst the eardrums of its prey. It had sharp talons to catch its prey, and its golden feathers were as strong as metal. Interfering with the bird, the stage 4 beginner mutated red fox began a battle against it, eventually being cruelly killed. But suddenly, Yuziyu attacked the bird with his own branches and successfully killed the golden eagle, thus gaining 70 evolution points. During those 2 weeks after feeding the essence of life, the growth of the peregrine falcons was much faster. Yuziyu praised the falcons for their performance and for having grown so much over time. The red fox had also always stayed by his side since saving his life a few days ago. That golden eagle had been taunting Yuziyu all week, wanting to attack her, but had finally been able to kill her himself now. He realized that his aura needed to be hidden, and that eagle had probably been drawn towards him precisely because of that. Just one level 7 golden eagle was problematic enough that if an animal of the same level as that one appeared, it would certainly end up dead. That's why Yuziyu needed to find ways to get even stronger, and he knew that in the canyon he might end up encountering a creature that could kill him, so he had to be very careful from then on. But not only he, but also the animals that lived with him needed to be strong, but he only had 70 evolution points now, which he could use to get even stronger. Lately, the peregrine falcons had reached level 3 and the red fox had reached level 4, which made him wonder what they would look like when they reached the next stage to be able to evolve. But before that, Yuziyu thanked them for their hard work and rewarded them with life essence, a body fluid that accelerated the evolution of living creatures. But quite suddenly an attack was heading their way, and the protagonist even tried to protect himself, but ended up receiving a warning that the root of his tree had been destroyed, and its branches had also suffered significant damage. What approached was a huge snake, leaving Yuziyu shocked because 26 of its branches had been destroyed and only 24 remained, but at least he could use them. He couldn't even sense that a new enemy had appeared, so immersed was he in victory. But the truth was that this huge snake had the ideal ability to hide its aura, and it was a big problem for those who weren't alert. Yuziyu tells the system to display the snake's attributes panel, and so he discovers that this was a beginner level 9 war axe snake. It had the talent of being able to hide its aura completely, and its special talents were its blade and strong fangs that could pierce steel plates, but it also had a tail that was like an axe that could be used to cut anything, such as enemy plants. That snake was quite a problem, and Yuziyu told the animals to hide behind him because he would take care of that threat before they could be targeted. Yuziyu strengthened his roots using evolution points so that he could defend himself against the snake's attacks, but he quickly realized that this was a very strong monster, but it still couldn't be underestimated because it was also at level 9. If it was handled hand-to-hand combat, he wouldn't need to be afraid of the snake, so he continued strengthening his body with his evolution points and decided to strengthen all his roots at the same time. Yuziu focuses on hitting the belly, which would be his ideal chance to attack, and hits it straight on, sending that snake out of his territory, but to his surprise his attack, even though it hit, didn't cause any punctures and the damage was nothing more than a small crack. Yuziu realized that everything had gone wrong and that his opponent could now easily cut him down, but he himself couldn't do any significant damage. Even so, he knew that he couldn't show fear so easily and that he had to release a strong killing intent in order to threaten his opponent and send him away, but suddenly the snake gets up and starts to move away. Yuziu sighs in relief as he realizes that he has managed to survive. He almost thought he was going to die that day. The fox and the birds approached to see if he was alive and well, and Yuziu assured them that he was and that they didn't need to worry so much. Despite this, he let that snake escape and knew that it could still be a threat again in the future and he would need to be very careful, and the reason this happened was all because he was too weak. It was very difficult to get strong in such a short space of time, and he knew that the snake would get even stronger when it took his energy, and he could only wait there if he wanted to die. But if he could strengthen his 8 roots, his strength and core could shatter, which was a big problem too. He had 10 evolution points to use to get to the next level, and the window asked if he would like to evolve as well. Just as Yuziu thought, after the beginner stage, he would reach rank 1, and so on. That was all very strong, but he needed to get even stronger than that now, because he didn't want to find himself in such a dangerous situation again. Yuziu accepted evolution, wanting to never stop evolving so that he could get stronger and live in a world where the weak die. He needed to start by becoming a big tree, so he couldn't stop evolving, and so he finally evolved into a mutant willow tree with the longevity of 200 years at rank 1 level. All the cut branches grew back and his body grew a lot too, and there were still 51 evolution points left to use. But not only Yuziu was affected by the light of evolution, but also the stage 7 beginner mutant red fox, as well as the hawks who had become peregrines and were now stage 5 beginners. The protagonist is happy because apparently his change could affect the animals around him too, so he tells the hawks to go out and find out where that snake has gone, and so they all go out, leading Yuziu surprised because they have become so fast that they look like a bullet. He realized that he might easily be able to pierce through those sturdy creatures now that they had evolved, but apart from them, the fox seemed much more powerful now too. Yuziu could feel the body's energy spreading, so he decided to open the status window, and it seems that since he had reached rank 1, his attributes and talents should have increased too. Suddenly, those 2 girls from before appeared running and begging for help when several monsters started running after them, and they kept running and wondering why they were all chasing them like that. Yuziu realized that the light of evolution must have drawn the monsters closer, and it seemed that for them, Yuziu was some kind of spiritual pill, and it must have been the same for the other monsters that had approached before. But that didn't mean that they could all always try to eat it whenever they wanted, and just when the girls who were running away were going to be attacked by the monsters, the fox intervened to save them, making them scream even more in fear. The fox began to hunt down all the monsters, as well as the hawk, leaving the girls surprised that they had all come to save them and even made it seem like an animal war. Yuziu says that now that the animals can't get any closer, he tells the fox and the hawks to back off because it would let all those cheeky monsters know what they were dealing with. After all, Yuziu himself was also a monster, and that's why he was going to kill them all. Yuziu tells them all to attack him at once, so they all go after him, and the protagonist quickly begins to react to the attack, wanting to turn them all into his new evolution points. Yuziu begins by killing each of them, earning 50 points for a mutant hippopotamus, 10 points for a mutant rat, 30 points for a mutant rhinoceros, 20 points for a mutant giraffe, and 20 points for a mutant wild boar. He also kills a mutant bat even though it was agile enough to dodge his initial attack, laughing because they could even try to block his attacks, but it seemed that he didn't need to kill every one of those mutant monsters. Yuziu killed all the mutant monsters he wanted and took their bodies, but there was still a need to know what he would do with the 2 girls who had fainted during all the intense combat. After all, if he let them know about his secret, things would get problematic, and killing them would turn him into a demon tree. If a villager finds out that 2 people have disappeared, it will only attract even more people than before, and they could even send an army to search for the disappearances and deaths, which would only bring more problems. There was a good chance that he would still be bought by the zoo as an ugly tree for display, but he quickly thought of one last course of action he could take to deal with the problematic situation quickly. The 2 girls suddenly wake up and are shocked when one of the tree's branches goes towards them, but Yuziu begins to communicate by writing on the ground, relieved that at least he was able to learn to write in his previous life. The girls stare at the ground, and the protagonist nervously hopes that they will believe him and that their father has actually become a willow tree. After all, he saved them when they were in danger and hopes that they will believe him. If it didn't work, there was only one other way. Then, one of the girls asks what his name was and his biggest secret so that she could confirm that it was really her father. So Yuziu asks for the system's help, which states that the girl was He Xiao Ling, aged 14, who liked Air Nui from the neighboring village, and the other was He Xiao Qing, aged 14, who dropped out of school to work and look after her grandfather and sister. The protagonist writes this information down, and Ling is embarrassed when he openly exposes his secret, making Qing laugh at her sister for liking a guy from the other village. Ling replies that only her father could know this information, and the protagonist remembers that during his free time he made a pair of clips just to pass the time, and gave them to the two girls. People always had special feelings for those who were gone, and they should also feel fear and longing at the same time. Considering that their father was buried under his roots, it was just a fact. Their father told Qing to take care of his grandfather and sister before he died, and it seemed that perhaps unintentionally, over time, this knowledge was passed on to Yuziu, and now he could talk to them as if he were their father. Yuziu says that he has passed on the job of looking after his sister, leaving school and working to her, thanking her and apologizing for passing on such an important task to her. Qing cries, and Yuziu realizes that with the passage of time, it seemed as if the whole thing had somehow merged with him, as if the soul of the girl's father had come into contact with him. The sisters talk about how unexpected the last 2 months have been, because the previous month a plane was attacked by a group of crows, and since it crashed, nothing has been left behind. What's more, the sea had a dark stain that devoured an entire boat. Some people say that the air had an unknown structure, and it was this structure that was causing the living things of the world to start evolving, and Yuziu knew that this was known as spiritual energy in the east and magic in the west. The protagonist never imagined that so many things like this would be happening in the outside world, and Qing agreed because she thought it was just fake news, but now that she was able to see her father as a tree, she could believe it. Meanwhile, Ling approached some of the animals that were trapped so that she could observe them more closely, and they even tried to threaten her life, but the fox quickly approached to threaten them back and leave the tame animals without threatening Ling. She is surprised that they were obeying her like that, and says that as expected, the fox, called Hong, was really incredible and respectable. Yuziu is surprised that Ling was treating Hong as if she were somehow familiar, and says that those 4 wolves she had been watching had only just been captured, and yet Ling was having the nerve to dare to play with them, but as Hong was just watching, it didn't look like anything was going to happen. That's because not only those wolves, but also the other mutant monsters that were trapped by their branches, if they weren't being held down properly, would certainly give them a lot of trouble. Even so, the cow he had captured was quite calm, and as he couldn't beat it now, he just kept it lying quietly, and somewhat bravely Qing decided to sleep on it too. Although she was quiet, there were still others who were very annoying and noisy and kept trying to escape, but Yuziu didn't want to deal with these animals now and decided to leave them alone for the time being. For now, he opened the status window and realized that he was full of new talents and skills that could be improved, and it was the perfect time to start strengthening himself again. He had a total of 149 evolution points, which was enough to increase his power, and it seemed that he could use a new skill also called Dense Fog Barrier, which spread a dense fog to hide himself. In addition, he could use the hallucinogen, which strengthened the effect of illusions to smoke and twigs to confuse creatures. These 2 new skills seemed great to Yuziu and were all very important for helping him improve, so he spent 20 of his points to activate them. Hallucinogenic wasn't a very rare type of ability, as many plants have structures and that sort of thing, but if you were the person Yuziu was a year ago, you wouldn't think it would be possible to combine the 2 abilities. Although he was rank 1 now, he could still increase his rank in the future, and even if the snake tried to meet him again in the future, things wouldn't be so nice and easy, especially if it attracted more enemies because of this. Yuziu definitely needed to kill this snake, but not now, because he needed to make sure that there were no more strong enemies around him before anything else. When the time came, it would be a real duel between Yuziu and the war snake. Suddenly, he realizes that Ling was worried because the Hong fox had disappeared, but the protagonist replies that she was right next to him, just testing the hallucinogenic effect and thus confirming that it was working. Yuziu says it's getting late and tells Hong to take the girls back to the village, and tells them not to tell anyone about him because if other people find out, they'll try to capture him for experiment, and they shouldn't even tell their grandfather. On the way back, Ling says that everything that happened that day was unbelievable, and before, they were being chased by beasts, and now they were walking on a big fox, and Qing agrees because walking through the forest was really good, and the 2 thank Hong for his help. Yuziu decided it was time to start the second round of evolutions and strengthen 50 branches with his 50 evolution points, as well as strengthening 9 of his roots with 45 evolution points. He improved the dense fog barrier with 10 evolution points, as well as improving the hallucinogen with 45 evolution points. That night, the beasts that were 10 kilometers away from Yuziu were unable to rest, because the bestial instinct within them was sensing the rise of a new being. And so, finally, everything in Yuzu was able to be strengthened. The protagonist is surprised because increasing the effect of his hallucinogen meant that the creatures around him also ended up seeing various frightening illusions, but they were all too noisy. He had upgraded his 2 skills to the 2nd level and only had 14 evolution points left to use, and although the talent still couldn't be upgraded, he still needed 50 evolution points. As his roots had already evolved to the point where they were 100 meters deep, he was now able to feel a lot of spiritual energy flowing through them. 100 meters was a lot, and there were many things down there that he didn't know about, and there might even be a spiritual river from that great distance. Yuzu realized that he should put those things underground, and just in time for his hawks to return. The protagonist realized that he had to be very careful not to run the risk of finding traces of the earth snake, because it seemed that the damage they had caused had not been minor. Yuzu tells the hawks to keep looking for the snake because it has devoured half of its branches, and surely it should show up, as it couldn't hold out for another duel. When the wolves continue to make noise, Yuzu hits them with his whip to tell them to shut up. Just then, Ling and Qing appear and realize that their father has been annoying the wolves again, leaving the protagonist surprised that they have returned so early. They ask how Yuzu could fight with these wolves when they were so cute, and Yuzu tells them to be careful when they approach their cages. Qing enters the wolf's cage and apologizes to the wolves because it should be hurting now, but soon it will stop hurting, and so she begins to take care of them. Yuzu is impressed that the wolves have calmed down even with the girls around, and they begin to look after the other animals, feeding them as well to keep them calm instead of agitated and nervous. The protagonist comments that he never expected Ling and Qing to be so good at looking after these creatures, and it seemed that humans were the only ones who could tame the animals, and that should be a good thing. Ever since Yuzu arrived in that world, he had been on constant alert for threats, but now seemed like a good time to relax. That morning, the Ling and Qing sisters also intended to go out to the mountain again, which made their grandfather very worried. They commented that after the death of the girl's father, it had been a long time since they had been able to see the two of them laughing like that, and it didn't seem bad at all to let them do what made them happy, but their grandfather was still curious as to why the two of them always went to the mountain. Yuzu realized that the fox had picked up the girls again that day too, and it had been half a month since they had been together, and it seemed that the sisters and Hong had been getting on well. The sisters were happy to meet Hong again, and because she had shown up to accompany them to the Yuzu tree. On the way, Qing asked why her sister was laughing, and Ling replied that it was because she had brought fertilizer for her father from one of her grandfathers to make her father even stronger, all because she had woken up early in the morning to collect it for him. She also knew that her father liked sweets, but soon the two sisters realized that it was getting dark and they would have to run to get to Yuzu. On the way, they meet a big monster and they have to run to save themselves, and in parallel Yuzu was taking care of killing new monsters, luring them to where he was to make them become his new evolution point. After killing the bees, the protagonist laughs as he sees the evolution points growing in his database again and thanks his hawks for their help, giving them some of his essence as a reward for their efforts. As expected, nurturing them was indeed the right choice because they were now at beginner stage 7, much stronger than before. Now he could use 100 evolution points to upgrade his mutant roots, and Yuzu was frustrated because it was twice as expensive to upgrade to the 2nd level now. For the time being, he decides to upgrade a first one to increase his strength, leaving all the beasts impressed and almost frightened by how much more powerful his root has become with an increase in power. Yuzu, despite this, felt such absurd pain that he could almost have lost consciousness, and once strengthened, it seemed that with that root it might be possible for him to use it to easily deal with rank 1 beasts now. Now he could also test the power of level 2, leaving Yuzu impressed because his root reached a much greater distance than before, and it was almost like a scene from Hell on Earth, catching so many animals at once, but with this he was able to gain so many animals at once that it was incredible. What's more, he got another 210 evolution points, making Yuzu happy because it was so good to get so many points at once that it felt like he was rich. He was determined to be able to duel the snake again and take revenge, and so he also discovered that his mutant roots could turn enemies into their own nutrients. Yuzu decides to keep them protecting the underground, and when something approaches, he would know quickly with new notifications. The protagonist sees the trapped animals grumbling and tells them to shut up because Ling will bring them food later, and when he thinks about it, he realizes that Hong left a long time ago and now it was almost dark, but there was still no sign of them coming. Yuzu told the hawk to search with the others for Hong and the girls because he was getting worried about them being late and shouldn't let them out of his sight. It doesn't take long for Yuzu to realize that Hong was bloodied and bruised and that he needed to use a lot of life essence to restore the fox's vitality before she could die. The protagonist asked what happened and why only Hong came back and where the girls were, and it it doesn't take long for Yuziyu to realize that a monster has caught them both, and Yuziyu almost sees Ching being eaten by the snake before he ends up running with his root to save her from death. He is amazed that the war snake has devoured 3 of his branches and has not only changed its appearance, but has also become much stronger than before. The snake also wanted to become more powerful so that it could kill the tree that had defeated it, but Yuziyu never expected it to become so powerful. The war snake realized that it was still no match for Yuziyu and retreated again and hid. Meanwhile, Yuziyu began to use his life essence on Ching in order to save her life, and the system reported that despite the use, her vitality showed no sign of improving. Yuziyu uses 10 evolution points and adds even more life essence to Ching, begging her to wake up, just as all the animals around her beg her to wake up and not die. Yuziyu continued to use life essence despite the system saying that no signs of improvement were detected in her, but he continued to use everything he had without stopping until he had no more evolution points. At the same time, Ling was in the village being looked after by a doctor who said that their medicinal level was too low and they needed to remove the poison somehow, but the poison had already reached her heart and brain, and even if she survived, she would be disabled. Suddenly, more people come running to ask if they have found Ching too, but no one has been able to find her yet, and they comment that there was a possibility that she had been eaten by beasts inside the mountain. The protagonist discovers from his hawk that Ling was also in a bad way and realizes that he had always known this, but now he fully understood that plants also had emotions. Because of life, shocks have happened and people have been saddened, but Yuziyu never imagined that one day he would feel such fury as he was feeling now. Yuziyu prepared the animals, now his servants, so that they could begin the great battle, and also a hunt that was about to begin on the mountain. On Lake Peng, near the archipelago, there were 16 accidents within half a year, with more than 20 ships suffering in just a fortnight. They later discovered that a group of mutant crows and mutant sea beasts were to blame. The group of crows devoured the planes, and the sea beasts devoured the ships, and the more the beasts improved, the more they wanted to continue to dominate. The loud sound emitted by the vehicles was insane, and the area practically became a dead zone, and so the spiritual energy finally began. The people began to prepare, knowing that they had discovered that there were even more invasions by mutant beasts and even more casualties were happening, as well as having detected levels of spiritual energy that were over 5,000 and kept increasing more and more. Creatures that exceeded 1,000 points of spiritual energy were threats to the army, and those that exceeded 5,000 were no longer affected by normal weapons. But to humanity's surprise, there were 8 places with monsters with more than 5,000 points marked, creating a big red alert of danger, to the point where they found a spiritual energy greater than 18,000 points. It seemed like nothing more than an announcement of the end of the world. The size of the creature decided its combatability. Currently, when the war snake faced such an opponent, it was like a king dominating everything around it. The war was still going on between Yuziyu's army and the great war snake, and they were all blinded with hatred at what the snake had done to Ling and Ching. Even Hong, who was now an early stage 8 fire fox, was the 4th time they had met and was ready for another fight. The first time was just as prey and predator, the second was when the snake fought Yuziyu, and the third was protecting the Ling and Ching sisters. That day, she was only a beginner stage 7 fox, so the difference in power was much greater, and she also ended up being only the hunted. At that moment, Hong broke down, thinking that if she had been stronger, then she could have changed things. This thought contaminated his entire brain, and so this time, even though he was going to die, Hong decided to destroy that snake whatever the cost. Even the war snake felt this instinct of hatred. The war snake understood that the fox would be a major threat in the future and that it had to be exterminated now. Hatreds, this time, needed to be resolved once and for all so that they could put an end to everything. It was a large creature that used its claws and head to hunt its prey, and now they were fighting with everything they had. This creature wanted to have the perfect body so that it could be at the top of the food chain. It had very strong scales, its teeth could break through many things, and its head was like an axe that could cut through anything. It could destroy everything, and on top of that, it had a paralyzing poison, which was why Hong was currently unable to beat the war snake. Even so, the great battle raged on between them, bloody enough that it didn't take long for the hawks to join the fray too. Not only did the war snake feel the great pressure brought by the hawk, but so did the fox. It wasn't a strong shock, but it was like a vital burn, telling them that they were going to kill their enemies at all costs. When things are rubbed together, heat is produced. The shock between the air and the body produces friction. If the speed of a human increases too much, then the body produces heat and then burns and dies. Ballistic diving was a method that could hurt both the enemy and oneself. It was a high speed that caused great damage to the enemy, but that same high speed produced heat, which was sometimes so strong that the body itself could not withstand such pressure. It was quite an attack to behold, and the power of the 8 peregrine falcons could wreak havoc. When the hawk's mother went out to get food one day, she was eaten, and day and night they could no longer feed themselves, themselves and were practically on the verge of death. But they were saved by Yuziyu, and so it was as if a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. And because their lives went on, they became able to fly through the sky, because now in their hearts, Yuziyu was like their father. But then one day, a huge sadness struck, and they all still remember well everything they saw, and the best way to do that was to use their best move to achieve victory. Even if they had to sacrifice themselves to do it, it was the necessary thing to do. The hawk swooped down on the war snake alongside the firefox, continuing that powerful and dangerous battle in the mountains. Many were wounded and lost in the process, but the war snake still didn't give in and shot out to attack Hong again, only for its blow to be held back by a firm tree root. And finally Yuziyu intervened during the fight, managing to catch the war snake at just the right moment. The bestial instinct inside the war snake screamed, and it understood that it couldn't face that enemy, quickly wanting to escape for its life. The first time it fought Yuziyu, it consumed its branches to increase to beginner stage 9. Qing and Ling were attacked because they smelled Yuziyu, and the second time they met, the snake again failed to win, and after being wounded, quickly fled. It was wrong about one thing, and that was that it never thought that Yuziyu would work alongside other creatures in order to win. Yuziyu managed, thanks to the support of his companions, to catch the war snake at the right moment so that he could drag it closer and finish it off using its own roots and branches. Yuziyu was furious, waiting to see if the war snake could really get away this time after facing each other so many times, firing a powerful blow that quickly made it spit blood. At that moment, the war snake had only one emotion controlling it, and that emotion was fear. Every nerve in its body was focused on the rage it was feeling towards the tree in front of it, but Yuziyu was ready for it because it was the snake that had provoked it first, and it certainly shouldn't have thought it would survive the end of all that fighting. There was nothing to do but keep fighting. The snake wrapped itself around Yuziyu, and the protagonist realized that this should be his last resort for survival, but it still didn't seem like much to be all he had to offer in a final battle. Yuziyu continued to fire his attacks with pure hatred, ordering him to give Qing his life back for everything he had done, attacking with all his might and everything he had so that he could kill him once and for all. Finally, after a long time, the system alerted him that the protagonist had been able to kill the war snake, obtaining 90 evolution points and thus declaring victory. The golden monkey rose to the first level thanks to this, but Yuziyu was blinded by hatred and continued to beat the war snake's corpse, making it get up over and over again, pulverizing the war snake's body into pure nothingness. But that wasn't enough to end Yuziyu's pain and tears. He knew that he had killed the war snake with all the certainty in the world, and the war snake that had killed Qing and Ling could be none other than him, for in this world the strong feed on the weak. All creatures were just trying to survive, no matter what kind of emotions such as sadness or fury were generated along the way. If you were weak, you couldn't survive, and the life you lost would become part of your power and nourish new life. It was because he knew all this that things should be simple, but Yuziyu was still sad and crying non-stop even after it was all over. He wondered why his tears wouldn't stop falling uncontrollably, not just his own, but those of Hong and all the other survivors, and wondered why he was sad after everything. Hong left Qing's body in the village and allowed people to find her. Yuziyu thanks everyone for their help because it was thanks to them that he was able to avenge Qing and Ling. He offers them what the war snake had risked his life to obtain, and it was entirely theirs to possess. Yuziyu hands them the essence of life, telling them to treat it as a reward for their effort, and then they could leave if they wished. The animals receive the essence of life and all evolve, leaving the protagonist surprised. The cow becomes an early stage 3 mutant savage with a lifespan of 20 years, with talents for using its horns to break through enemies and causing earthquakes using its heavy paws to shake the ground. The wolves become early stage 5 storm mutants with 20 years of longevity, able to control the wind like real storms. Yuziyu is surprised that their appearances have all changed so quickly and finds it quite a scene. Yuziyu says that in the future, the wild cow would become very strong, and he was looking forward to being able to see its development over time, and the 4 storm wolves had awakened the wind attribute too, so he was very excited and proud of their improvements. Yuziyu said that he wished he could accompany them on this journey. He knew that in that era, creatures could control the elements, and this was totally normal, just like humans. His mist counted as a talent, and the dense mist was made from his leaves, and he could also photosynthesize with them. This had the side effect of a hallucinogen, which affected the nerves of living beings. Even so, Yuziyu was surprised that the monsters had even gone up a level, even though some of them hadn't changed much since their previous forms. Suddenly, the animals began to bow their head to Yuziyu, leaving him confused, but it seemed that they all wanted to be by Yuziyu's side from now on. The protagonist then promised that they would all certainly become even stronger than they were now, and also that he would never let any of them die, and would protect them all. In this world, there were many things that Yuziyu still didn't understand or know, but there was still only one path to follow, and that was to fight to get stronger and survive. It was only by surviving that it was possible to experience against everything in this world, so he was going to do his best to make everyone strong so that anyone who went against him would fear him. Yuzu knew that it would all start with him and things would start to change from then on. On a cold night, where the stars covered the sky, the battle with the war snake didn't even seem to have happened. Yuzu was immersed in the body brought about by rank 1 evolution. The peregrine falcons were doing an area patrol while the storm wolves were doing a land patrol. The heron, the cow, and the monkey were cleaning up the battlefield. The fox was on watch and the bald animal just kept sleeping. Yuzu soon woke up the bald animal and asked it what it thought it was doing sleeping while everyone else continued working. Yuzu threatens the animal to go out and work like everyone else, and if it dares to come back without having cooperated with anything else, he'll find a way of needing it. The animal growls at Yuzu, but then he realizes that it wasn't a threatening sound but a warning one when a strong light appears above them, leaving him confused and curious to know exactly what kind of light it was. Suddenly, Yuzu realized that there was a human form inside that light, thus awakening something or someone inside that light.